The official FPL game is due to launch sometime today, but we've already had just so many price reveals that you can quite comfortably build a team. And I'm going to talk you through my first draft. Okay, so similar to how I made my other first draft video, I've used a tool called FPL.Team. It's been updated with all of the player price reveals that we've had so far, which is, in my mind, pretty much all of the players that I wanted to pick anyway. So you can already get like a 100% confirmed idea of what your team's going to look like in the main game. I'll leave a link to FPL.Team in the description. All right, let's get on with the video. So first up, looking at my goalkeeper and defence, this is kind of my thinking. The Arsenal defence were by far and away the best defence in the league last season, right? They conceded the fewest goals of any team, and with Gabriel, White, Saliba and Raya at the back, they looked really solid. And these four guys, I would say, are the most nailed in terms of the Arsenal defence. Now, with Calafiori, the Italian defender, potentially signing for them, obviously Timber coming back from his knee injury, he's basically a new signing. It does leave a little bit of doubt as to how they line up, but with how good the Gabriel-Saliba centre-back partnership was, with how good Raya was, and with how good Ben White was, I think you'd be hard-pressed for these guys to be left out of the team. Obviously, as the season progresses, Champions League football, cup games, etc., there's going to be some rotation. But at the start of the season, I don't see any way that these guys aren't playing for Arsenal. They only conceded 29 goals last season from 38 games and kept 18 clean sheets. And we all know sort of the goal threat, at least, that Gabriel provides from set pieces. So that might be a little clue as to who is in my defence. Next up, I wanted to talk about the Crystal Palace defence. Now, as a team, I think Palace completely transformed under their new manager, Glasner. I think he's going to, well, all of these defenders are reasonably priced in the game. You've got Gahey and Richards confirmed to be 4.5 million, Mitchell at 5, and Dean Henderson, the goalkeeper, likely starting goalkeeper for Crystal Palace, also 4.5 million. So I think of these sort of 4.5 million, well, goalkeepers at least, Henderson is emerging as the best. So maybe a little clue as to who I've got in my team there. But Gahey, Richards, both at 4.5 million are really strong as well. Yes, when you look at the total stats across the season, Crystal Palace do not look like one of the best teams. But I feel like under their new manager, Glasner, that's kind of a cut-off point for when you really need to review their stats. And they've played 14 games under him, conceded 15 goals and kept 5 clean sheets. Now, on the face of it, those 5 clean sheets might not be that impressive, but only conceding 15 goals from 14 games, I think, is a really good record. They'll, of course, have a full pre-season under his belt with Palace. They're really getting them to play the style of football that he wants to play. Gahey having an absolutely tremendous tournament at the Euros. Now, I think that the sky, well, not necessarily the sky's the limit, but I think things are looking up at least for the Crystal Palace defence, and I think you'd be hard-pressed to ignore them in this game. We've got Trent Alexander-Arnold coming in at, well, one of his cheapest prices, I think, in the last 2 or 3 seasons. 7 million he comes in the game at, and I just think that's phenomenal value for the upside that he brings. And I don't necessarily think of Trent Alexander-Arnold as a defender. I think of him as a player that can get returns through 3 different means. He just so happens to be classed as a defender. He's so good from an attacking perspective. You know, the goals and assists, you can basically count on him to get some across the season. I mean, even though it's a little bit uncertain as to how they play under the new manager, I think you can safely expect Trent to get sort of 5 goals, 5 assists, something like that throughout the season. Maybe more assists this season than last, right? And he kept 8 clean sheets in total. So you add up those returns, that's 16 returns in total from 25 starts. And if he got something relatively similar this season, I think 7 million is tremendous value. And to be honest, I think under Slot, I just think he's going to do better than he did last season, to be honest. So I expect those numbers to go up. His price has gone down. I think he's a really attractive option in this game. And finally, I wanted to just talk about all of the 4.5 million defenders that I personally like the look of. One more that isn't on here is Man United's Lisandro Martinez. I think he's a really decent option as well, but just a little bit cautious to how United line up defensively with potential signings they're going to make and how poor they were last season. But there are 5 other options I think are genuinely pickable at 4.5 million. And I think, to be honest, I'm probably going to pick 2 of these. Konsa and 8 Nori, for me, are probably the strongest. Obviously, Villa being a Champions League team now. 8 Nori, Wolves. Really attacking. I really liked how he played last. He basically played as a left winger at times, right? Richards and Gahey already spoke about the Palace defence. They both come in at 4.5 million. I think they're great value. And Lewis Dunk at 4.5 million is pickable as well. I'd say probably Lewis Dunk is the weaker of all of these players. Certainly Brighton defensively, they didn't really impress me that much last season. But he could be a good option. And I would say between him, Gahey and Richards, he's probably the most attacking, right? He carries quite a bit of threat with him from set pieces, but yeah, I mean, you kind of heard my preference there, but all 5 of these defenders, including Lisandro Martinez of Man United too, are pickable. All right then, and here is how my defence is shaping up for game week 1 at the moment. I've gone for Dean Henderson, Trent Alexander-Arnold, Ezri Konsa and Gabriel. Now, Gabriel's price has not been revealed at the time of making this video. FPL.Team have predicted him to be 6 million. I think they're pretty bang on there. I think he will come in at 6 million. Dean Henderson's been revealed at 4.5, Trent at 7, and Konsa at 4.5. And you know, West Ham away for Konsa, Wolves at home for Gabriel, Ipswich away for Trent, and Brentford away for Henderson. I think decent fixtures for these 4 players. All right, on to the midfield and a couple of players that I want to chuck into my team straight away. Anthony Gordon at 7.5 million, I think, is great value. 11 goals and 16 assists last season. So what's that? 27 attacking returns from 34 starts, putting up some really good numbers. 7.5 million for that level of returns, I think, is great value. He's going to be nailed on in my mind to start for Newcastle every game. Eddie Howe absolutely loves him. Didn't get played that much during the Euros, so there's going to be no injury or fitness risks in my mind. So he's going to have a bit of time off between now and pre-season, but he got through the Euros just fine, and I think he's due a great season in FPL. Next up, I really like Eze. Coming in at 7 million with Elise off to Bayern Munich, I think Eze is going to become the real Crystal Palace talisman. He made only 24 starts last season because he was plagued a little bit with injury. I wouldn't say he's a glass man just yet. It's definitely one to keep an eye on though with those hamstring injuries he picked up last season. But I think it's worth going for him from the start at 7 million. 11 goals, 5 assists from those 24 starts last season. And like I said, with Elise going, he's going to be the talisman. He's going to take the penalties. He's going to take the free kicks, which he wasn't necessarily doing when Elise was in the team. So yeah, Eze is going to become that Crystal Palace talisman in my mind, and he's due a really good points total. So here is the midfield that I've picked so far. Gordon and Eze, already spoke about them. I really like Brian Mbeumo at Rashford both at 7 million. Now, I guess Mbeumo kind of does rely on Tony leaving, but I think it's basically written in the stars that Tony is going to leave Brentford this summer. And if he does, we all know how good, if you remember back to the start of last season, that is, we all remember how good Mbeumo was without Tony in the team. He really becomes that Brentford talisman, takes penalties, and I'd actually question if he's a better player than Tony is. I really like Mbeumo. He's obviously going to take the pens and free kicks, just become Brentford's talisman if Tony is sold. So I really like the thought of going for Mbeumo. And then Rashford. I get that it's a bit of a risk. He had a really poor year last year, right? But we all know the player that Rashford can be. 7 million, Fulham at home first up. He got left out of the England squad at the Euros. There's no greater motivation in my mind for Rashford to have a better season than what he's gone through last season, obviously missing out on the Euros this summer. So I think it's going to be a new, rejuvenated Rashford in a hopefully relatively rejuvenated Man United team. You know, new ownership coming in, new coaching staff coming in, hopefully a few new positive signings for the squad as well. I think Rashford's going to be a really good option. All right then, Erling Haaland, he makes my team. Not necessarily with game week 1 in mind though. He's got Chelsea away, which I think is potentially a tough fixture for them. But going forwards, game weeks 2, 3 and 4, I think you'd be hard pressed to leave him out because essentially he's the best captain for those weeks, right? Ipswich at home, a great fixture. West Ham away, Brentford at home. You're probably going to want to captain him there. So yes, game week 1 might not necessarily be the best captain, but given he's 15 million and probably the best captains for 2, 3 and 4, I think it's worth picking him in your team for game week 1. Not necessarily captaining him, and then of course giving him the armband for the next few game weeks. Next up, Ollie Watkins. Now, you'll notice that Salah isn't in this team, and I think a combination of Watkins, Haaland, and my third striker could actually, sort of make the difference between not picking Salah. Watkins had an absolutely stellar season last year outright, and with how he performed for England, obviously that semi-final goal in the Euros, I think he's proven his level as a really top class, not necessarily world class yet, but a real top centre forward. And he's coming at 9 million, which I think is fantastic value. You look at his returns last season, 19 goals, 18 assists. That's 37 attacking returns from 37 starts, right? That's on a level with someone like Cole Palmer, who's been priced in this game at 10.5 million. I think he's, in terms of returns last season and value in the game this season, Ollie Watkins is probably the best player in the game when you compare those two stats with one another. Now, I mentioned that I don't think Haaland is necessarily the best captain for game week 1. And my third striker, I'm picking to be the best captain for game week 1, essentially. You look at the fixtures, Man United at home to Fulham is pretty decent. Liverpool away to Ipswich, pretty decent. Newcastle at home to Southampton, pretty decent. Chelsea, Man City, not necessarily the best game in my mind to pick a captain from. And then you got Spurs away at Leicester, which I think is a good game to pick captain from. I think the best captain in my mind right now for game week 1 is Alexander Isak of Newcastle. And that's the third striker I'm going to be picking. So here's the front line. Watkins, Haaland, Isak. Watkins 9 million, Haaland 15 million, and Isak coming in at 8.5 million. Like I said, I think Isak's the best captain for game week 1. Things might change as we get closer to the start of the season and that first deadline. But right now, with the stats and numbers that Isak put up last year, I think he's the best captain. And for that reason, I think regardless, whether you think he's the best captain or not, 8.5 million is great value for him. And he should almost be a shoe into your team, I think. And in my mind, he's the best captain for game week 1 as well. Okay, and I just wanted to quickly talk through the bench. Now, not necessarily saying this is my final bench, but it kind of follows the structure that I think the bench in the FPL game I pick is going to follow. So goalkeeper, Turner at the moment. I mean, ultimately, the goalkeeper I pick will be the 4 million goalkeeper in the game that's most likely to start, right? That's quite simple. At the moment, Turner's in there, is what it is. It's just a placeholder. We'll see who emerges as the best 4 million goalkeeper option. Beyond that, I want to pick a 4 million defender, a 4.5 million defender, and a 4.5 million midfielder that I think has got a good likelihood of starting. Now, confirmed in those positions, Harwood Bellis for me is the best 4 million defender in the game right now. He played pretty much every game for Southampton in the Championship last year. I think that translates to him playing every game for Southampton in the Premier League this year as well. And Ait-Nouri, with the upside he brings in terms of attacking returns for 4.5 million, I think is great value. I can't justify starting him against Arsenal at the Emirates when I've got Gabriel Konsa and Trent who can start instead. But he definitely makes my bench and can come into my team for any future game weeks should he need to. And then I've gone for Moda of Brighton. I don't know about that 4.5 million midfielder spot yet. FPL haven't really released prices that low and that sort of undesirable yet. Basically, I'm just going to go for a 4.5 million midfielder that plays every game. But bar Turner and Moda, even then I've spoken about the structure of my bench. This is, I think, going to be my team. All right, and that's the end of the video. Like I said, this isn't made in the official FPL game, but we've had so many price reveals now that using FPL.Team, you can build an FPL team now. We've got so many prices, it's easy enough to do. So I hope you enjoyed that video and found it useful. If you did, please leave me a like rating. You can subscribe to the Goal to Goal channel, which should be just there, and let me know in the comments if there are any changes you'd make to this team. All right, thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you in my next video.